Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crime on the Record, where we delve into compelling and often complex stories. Today, we're going to just be going over some updates to our last episode on Karen Reed. So, I think most of you, if you're here, you've probably heard the coverage that we've had on Karen Reed. But if not, here is a quick recap, just in case you're not familiar. So, Karen Reed is a finance professor from Massachusetts. And on January 29th of last year, 2022, Karen Reed dropped her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, off at the home of a fellow police officer, Brian Albert. So, again, John O'Keefe was a police officer. And they all were out that night drinking together, a bunch of friends. And at the end of the night, several people are going back to Brian Albert's house, and Karen Reed drops her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, off and then goes home. When he doesn't return the next morning, Karen is frantic, hysterical, and decides she's got to go look for him. John was then found deceased in the yard of the Albert home, lying in the snow. Now, not long after his death, police went on to charge Karen Reed with murder. Not even manslaughter, but murder. I think they originally started with manslaughter and then upped the charges to murder, stating that she had hit him and left him to die in the snow. So Karen Reed has stated that the last time she saw John, he was entering the Albert home on Fairview Road. So she doesn't know what they're talking about. I mean, this story is so complete opposites. I mean, it's not just like a few things are off. This is like two different, like you're on one side of the street or the other, and there's no middle ground. There's been much speculation as to whether Reed did kill John O'Keefe or if there is some kind of cover up going on due to the homeowner being a police officer. I mean, I know that the victim was a police officer as well, but it's not necessarily that. I don't think if there's some kind of cover up, I don't think necessarily that it's like, you know what, our buddy killed this person and we're just going to let that slide. Like it's whatever. I think a lot of times it's more like not even believing that a fellow police officer could do something. Like just, that the whole blue wall, just assuming that like you're going to have their back and they didn't do anything wrong. You're going to cover for them, whatever. And so I think that you just could possibly have rather a large domino effect of people just continuing to assume that, you know, Brian Albert or no one in that home did anything that night and that John O'Keefe died another way. So there has been speculation that John went into the home that night and was at some point attacked and then put into the yard to be found, which don't even get me started on that. It makes no damn sense. Like none of this man being found in this yard makes sense to me at all. At all. Not where he was found, not the way he was found. It just it's too much. So some people have gone so far as to name Colin Albert, who is Brian Albert's nephew, as the attacker. There has also been discussion of a trooper, Michael Proctor, planting evidence. Now, earlier this past week, August 25th, the Norfolk County District Attorney, Michael Morrissey, came out and made a statement. And during his statement, he was very, very insistent that Michael Proctor was never at the scene on Fairview Road at all at any time. I mean, he said it over and over. He was just, let me be clear. Michael Proctor was not there on the scene. That's a problem because I went back looking through paperwork, and as early as I think as far back as I went, I saw something like the first thing I caught just happened to come across was a filing on May 3rd. So on May 3rd, the Commonwealth filed a memorandum opposing where the defense had made a motion to have cell phone records produced. And this memorandum stated something quite different. So in this paperwork on page 3, paragraph 2, it states Trooper Michael Proctor and another officer were responding officers who took witness statements. So, you've got legal paperwork in the case stating that he was there that morning taking statements. And also, I found in the case file that there is where the Commonwealth did their statement of case, where they basically were like, "Hey, this is our case. This is what we're saying." I don't know if it's kind of like a what you would put out to get like an arrest warrant or whatever, but it's basically just them stating, what they think happened. And in that, it says that Michael Proctor was there. So it is everything that I'm finding is in direct contrast to the statement the DA gave just this week. So that's a little concerning, like why is he so blatantly, clearly lying? I mean, somebody's lying. If you've got this trooper who's filling out all of his own statements that are in the file talking, because that's there too. There's his statements from his interviews with witnesses. So you've got him filling out statements and then you turn around and say he wasn't there. Well, then why did he fill out a statement? It makes no sense. Okay. Another thing, there was video footage of from earlier in the night on the 28th of Karen Reed's SUV going towards Fairview Road, where she passed Temple Bethlehem, I think it was, and then the library. And they have her car leaving and going over there. They have her car on video from the library the next morning when they see the car go by going to see if she can find John because he didn't come home. However, the footage is completely gone from the time frame of when Karen Reed would have driven by if the story of her hitting him when she dropped him off were true. Because the camera showed her go by at like 12, 10, 15. I don't know the exact numbers. I don't have it in front of me, but sometime after 12 going to the house on Fairview Drive, Albert's house. So there is a discrepancy in the timing of certain things between what Karen Reed is saying and what some of the witnesses are saying. And this discrepancy could easily be figured out if you just pulled the library surveillance video for when Karen Reed come back through. Because depending on what time she come back through, their story adds up or it doesn't. Because, they're all saying that there's a certain time that they got there. And then, everybody in the house is saying that John got out of the car and then Karen backed into him doing a 3-point turn and it killed him. And then she drove away. She's, and this was at like much later time, like 12:40 or something. However, there is one of the messages on John's voicemail was Karen calling him, and you could hear a garage door closing and a door closing. And so I believe between that and some of the cellular data they've gotten, they've been able to see that shows her actually being back at their house. So it's not really any way she could be in two places at once. And I think that the discrepancies in that timeline would have really been borne out had we been able to see the surveillance video. However, the footage magically vanished. So I just don't understand how just that one piece went missing. Like, okay, we constantly see in true crime stories that the cops will find somebody and they'll go by they'll see, a store near the crime scene or an office building near the crime scene, and they'll go and ask for surveillance footage. And what do we hear? Like 90% of the time, oh, it doesn't work. Like, why do you even have the damn cameras if they don't work? But that's a whole other issue. But we hear that all the time. So if the library had said, oh, the videos weren't working, we'd have been like, well, that sucks, but they weren't working. It'd have been great if they were because we would know so much more, but they weren't. So, okay. But to say that they worked and you have every bit of it except for the next morning. Very odd to me. Apparently, it has been stated that surveillance footage was given to Proctor himself by library staff, and they have stated he was given all of the footage, which would have covered the entire time frame. So, who do you believe? Do you believe Proctor? Do you believe library? I don't know. The defense has alleged that all of the witnesses were interviewed together and interviewed by an officer that wasn't even supposed to be working that day. So a big, the defense is, their big thing is saying that this is a cover up, and that they're, that these police officers are trying to cover up from a fellow police officer or one of his family members killing this guy. And so they're stating several assertions to prove that. And one of theirs is that the Albert family was very close to this guy, Lank. I don't know if it's Sergeant Lank, Deputy Lank. I'm not exactly sure, but his last name is Lank. And they're saying that he was off work that day. He was not scheduled to work, yet for some reason, they called him in to do the interviews at the home that morning. Why was he even called into the scene? He wasn't supposed to work that day. There's plenty of other people that could have done it. So why feel the need to call in a family friend to do these interviews rather than whatever officer was on duty? And also, why in God's name would you have them being interviewed together in the same room? That's absurd. I mean, that's like 101 of interviewing. Separate witnesses. Don't let them get their stories straight. Ridiculous. Some of you may have heard of this guy. Some of you may not have. I had not heard of him until the Karen Read case, and now his name seems to be all over the place if you follow it. So you might know. Aidan Kearney, I believe is how you say it. So he's a blogger and journalist who goes by the name Turtle Boy. Now, he has reported that Michael Proctor, and again, this is his reporting. I'm not saying this, but he has come out saying that he is an actual journalist and that he investigated this and he has shown this to be true. So just like any other news source that has, or news media that has sources that they can't name, they won't give their source up, but they'll tell you, I've got the information. I just am not going to name my source. That's what he's saying. So take that for what it's worth. If you feel like he is just like any other news source, then, I guess we should listen to him. If not, but Turtle Boy has reported that Michael Proctor made up a company to say that they plowed the road that day, the morning of the 29th. And he asserts that this was done so that they could find somebody to be the plow driver that was plowing the road by using someone that supposedly worked at this company they made up, instead of interviewing the actual plow driver, because the actual plow driver has made it very clear that he, when he is out plowing, he has to be constantly on alert for hitting anything under the snow. So he says he's constantly scanning, that anybody who runs a snowplow is constantly scanning, because there's so much snow at times that you want to make sure you don't hit a parked car or hit something that's been left in the street, or, so they're constantly scanning. And he said that he is absolutely sure there was nobody there when he plowed the road, or he would have seen it. So, again, timeline not adding up if that's true. Because if that's true, then there's no way, if he came through plowing roughly 2 hours after John was dropped off at the home, then he couldn't, well, if he had been there and he's saying he didn't see anybody, there's no way he could have missed him. Because if the prosecution's theory is that Karen Read hit John after dropping him off at 12:30 a.m., then his body would have had to been around there between 12:30 and 2:30 a.m. when the plow driver came through. So why didn't he see him? Another thing that has come up, they got the Apple data from John O'Keefe's phone, and the health app shows that John O'Keefe took 88 steps and was going up and down 3 flights of stairs and then taking 30 more steps after he arrived at the Fairview Road home. Now, if that's true, I don't know how he couldn't have went into the home, because the only other explanation to me is if he, first of all, the 88 steps, what was he, just walking around the house? Was he walking up and down the block? Like, what the hell was he going? What was he doing? And then what about the elevation? If he's not inside going up and down this 3-story, just happens to be a 3-story home, how is he getting up 3 stories? Is he climbing on the roof? Is he climbing a tree? Like, this is comical. I don't understand. So and here's the thing. I preface all of this by saying if this is true, because there's so much talk of a cover-up going on that there's being so much mud thrown from each side. The prosecution says that the defense is just making stuff up, trying to get Karen Read off, and the defense is saying that the prosecution's flat out telling lies against her to prosecute her. So that's the thing. If these things are true, a lot of it we know because you can see it in paperwork. Some of it, though, it's stuff they've come out and said, but we don't know yet. It wasn't until, and this is another important thing, it wasn't until the second search of the property that the taillight remnants were found. And this is important because the reason that they came to the conclusion that Karen Read backed into him is that they were saying that when they took John O'Keefe's body, that they found remnants of taillight there, and then saw that Karen Read's taillight was broken and put 2 and 2 together and realized that she had hit him. However, how these were found, a little questionable. And then it's also questionable that later the chief of Canton PD was driving by, quote, on a whim, and saw yet another shard. How'd you miss them the first time? So you didn't even find them until the second search. And then all of a sudden, the second search, like you've already been out there once and screwed up and didn't find everything. So you get caught out there a second time. I feel like you should be doing an even more in-depth search. But you're going to tell me even after the second search, you didn't find this, and somebody just, so it was hidden so much so that you didn't find it in this first or second search. But the chief of Canton PD was just driving by and happened to see this shard from the road. Come on. I mean, I don't know if Karen Read is guilty or not, but I don't care, guilty or not, that's bullshit to me. It's just bullshit. It's ridiculous. And also the way they talked about finding it, they said that when they went out that they took a leaf blower and blew the snow away to get to these shards. What? A leaf blower? Like, what kind of evidence could you have possibly been? Excuse me. I keep getting the hiccups, and then they go away, and then they come back. But what kind of evidence could you possibly be screwing up by doing that? I mean, we see them when they find a body. The second, when you see them and they're out there digging for a body, the second they think that they have found something, they halt everything, because they may be out there with shovels or a backhoe or whatever, these huge machines. And the second they've dug far enough that they're like, you know what, we think we see the person, then they have to start being very careful, because the items around the person could also provide valuable evidence. So they have to preserve not just the body that they're going to pull out, but everything around the body, to ensure that if there's any blood around the body, if there's any bodily fluids that seeped into the ground around the body, their hairs around the body, anything. So if there could be anything in that snow, what sense does it make to use a leaf blower to blow it away? Are you serious? Like, is this their first day? I feel like this is their first case. Like, you know what? Just take a leaf blower out there. I mean, the snow like is pretty thick now, and it wasn't as thick earlier. So I bet if you just blow all that shit off, you'll be able to find it. It's fine. Really? Like, really? Like, that's your go-to game plan? I mean, meanwhile, you see other places find something and they're out there with freaking paintbrushes, brushing stuff away and sifting just to make sure nothing of evidentiary value could accidentally be disposed of. Meanwhile, these fools are out there with a leaf blower, just blowing shit all over the neighborhood. Genius, I tell you, genius. But there are also some questions that make you question Karen Reed's story as well. And I say that I give these because I want to give a balanced view. You know, we always say that we try to not be overly critical of any one person without giving facts of the other side. We try to be as fair as possible and provide facts. So I think that, you know, if we're going to do an episode all about this, you know, case and talk about all the things that have come up that seem like a cover up, then I think it only fair to tell the other side. So here are a few things that seem kind of fishy about Karen's story. So in her initial interview, she said she dropped John off and went home because she had been having stomach issues. So the first interview that they did with her, I think it was the very first one, because they didn't do an interview with her immediately because she was so hysterical that one of the police officers, I think there was the police sergeant or supervisor on duty, told one of the officers to take her home. And then on the way driving her home, he gets a call back saying, "Hey, she's talking to her parents and she's talking about suicide. So I'm scared to take her and leave her," which, you know, so this is when they bring her back, and she was actually taken to the hospital to make sure that they had her under observation. So they didn't talk to her for a little while, but she says that, you know, she had stomach issues, and so she was just dropping him off. Then we see teasers of a Dateline interview that she's done. And I say teasers because I don't think any of these interviews that she's done have actually come out fully yet. I think they're still just like teasers. But the one for Dateline, she said when asked that she didn't know if they were invited. So she was waiting on him to go inside and check before leaving. Because the whole question has been, why do you not know if John went inside? Why would you not have just walked in with him? Why did he go in without you? And so initially she said, you know, my stomach was hurting when we were at the second bar, and I was going to try to, like, you know, push through and be a team player and keep partying. But, you know, on the way over there, my stomach just got too bad. This is not verbatim. I'm paraphrasing here, but, you know, she's basically like, by the time we got there, my stomach was just too bad that I was like, you know what? I'm going home. If you want to stay, I'll drop you off, but I'm going to the house. Okay, cool. She sees him walking up, walkway, going in. She bounces. But then gets to Dateline and says she never mentions the stomach ache. All she says is that the reason she sat out in the car for so long, because that's the question, you know, why she didn't go in with him, yet sat outside for like 10 minutes in the car, because the car was parked out front for several minutes. And so her answer to them was that she didn't know if they were invited. She's like, I didn't know these people. And so I already felt kind of awkward around them. And I did not hear them extend an invitation to us. So she's like, I know they didn't extend an invitation to me, and I didn't hear them extend an invitation to us. And especially since I'm not friends with them, I didn't want to just go in and crash the party. So I told John to go in and make sure that it was okay for us to be there, that we actually were invited. And she said that he went in and she waited for about 10 minutes and he never came out. And so she got pissed and left. She was like, well, to hell with it. I guess he's not coming back, which I get. You know, you're already like, and it could be both things. Maybe her stomach was hurting and this happened. And so she was like, you know what? My stomach's hurting. I ain't got time for this. I'm out. But then we see, though, that in another document by the defense that she said she was waiting on him to go in and make sure they were at the right house. And then she was going to park and go in. And he never came back out. Now, I will say this. I think personally that Karen Read was probably pretty shit-faced that night. I don't know, because everyone there says that she didn't seem drunk, but as many drinks as she had, I could see her being a little off. So I think maybe the difference in her explanation might be, and I'm not making excuses for her. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to think this through. And so I think an explanation could be that she doesn't really remember a lot of that, and it's a little fuzzy to her. And so she's like, I remember my stomach hurting, so I think I just didn't want to go. And then maybe a little later, she's like, I did send him in, and I remember I was waiting on him to come back out. So why was I doing that? Like, maybe I just didn't think we were invited. So I probably sent him in to make sure. And then later on, she was like, no, you know what? It wasn't that. I sent him inside just to make sure it was the right house before I parked. So who knows? Another thing was that Jennifer McCabe has said she asked John and Karen at the bar if they wanted to come to the house. So I think that was another thing that was kind of questionable, was why does it keep coming out that, she didn't even know if they were invited, or, she never planned to go, when Jennifer McCabe says she invited them both while they were there, and they both said, yeah, we want to come. Like, they both planned to come. So I still have a lot of questions. These are just, the thing is, like, I wrote this up because I've had back-to-back sessions. In fact, I've got a session in 12 minutes, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. But I've had back-to-back sessions all week. So I wrote up the recap really quick, and then I went back and added, like, the things that have come out really quick. And then right before getting on here, I was like, you know what? I still got a few questions. So these questions might have fit better in one of the other parts of the story. So I'm sorry if you're like, why the hell didn't you go over that 5 minutes ago? But here they are. So the first one, if the interview says, like, the interviews with everyone is saying that the body was 12 feet from the road, how the hell did she back into him from the road? And I know I'm saying the body, and I know the body has a name. I know it's John O'Keefe, but I'm just trying to talk in, the terms that were used in the paperwork. And in the paperwork, it talks about the body being 12 feet from the road. But they're also saying that she did a 3-point turn and hit him. Well, if you don't see any tire marks coming up onto the curb and into the yard, how the hell do you get up enough speed to hit somebody doing a 3-point turn to throw them 12 damn feet into the yard? I mean, 12 feet, that's a lot. It just seemed really odd. Not to mention the fact that almost everything that I see keeps going on and on about how the car hit him in the head. And I cannot comprehend how the car hit him in the head. Like, did he go and just fall in the yard and she backed into his head? And even then, how the hell did he get 12 feet? Because at least if he's standing up, he might have stumbled back several feet. But if he's sitting down and she hit him in the head, would he turn around and crawl 12 more feet? Like, I just don't, it doesn't make sense to me. This question is kind of stupid. I don't even know if I should have put it in here. But in reading the comments or the interview from Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts, the two women that were with Karen Read the morning that she went back and found him, they both, so their statements talk about how Karen Read at some point, gets there, she finds him, she tries to do CPR, she gets blood all over her, and she keeps making the comment of, I got my period. What? I mean, I don't know if this is here nor there, has anything to do with this damn story, but it was so odd to me. It was such an odd comment. Like, who just gave mouth to mouth to somebody and tried to resuscitate them who clearly has blood coming out of their nose and mouth and sees blood on them and thinks, oh my God, I just started. What? That, I mean, and the reason it really resonated with me is because I thought, you know what? Maybe she was pretty shit faced that night, and maybe her ass was still drunk that morning. Maybe that's why she's making some crazy ass comments. Like, you know, I mean, if you're that drunk, you might be like, where the hell did this blood come from? Even though I know 5 minutes ago I was doing CPR on somebody bleeding. I don't know. It just was such a weird ass comment that I wrote it on there. Again, I was saying that they talked about she didn't seem drunk. That was a question I had. If her blood alcohol content could have been as high as 0.29 that night, how is it that Jennifer McCabe and some of the others have said that neither of them seemed drunk? If you're 0.29%, you are shit faced. You are blackout drunk. I mean, you're in like alcohol poisoning levels. So I don't know how you would not seem drunk at all. Like, they seem completely coherent. In fact, one of them, I think it was Brian Albert, and I might be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I believe it was Brian Albert who in his interview said that they didn't even look buzzed. Like, they didn't even look like they had a buzz. So if you hadn't seen it, you wouldn't have even known they were drinking. I don't buy that and buy that she was 0.29%. There's no way those two things go together. In one interview, and some of these are just minuscule things, so they may not mean anything, but when I was reading through things, I was like, huh? So I wrote it down. So in one interview, Brian Albert says that he had no idea that John and Karen had been invited. So he's trying to play stupid. Like, in one interview, he's like, I didn't even know they was coming. So I didn't look outside for John. I didn't try to go out there and find him. Like, I didn't even know he was invited. But then in another, he says that he and his wife invited them over when they were at the bar. So, like, which is it? You both invited him over, or you had no idea he was coming? In Julie Alberts, and if you don't remember Julie, she is Colin Albert's mom, Chris Albert's wife. So Julie Albert's interview, she says, and this is a huge one for me. She says in that interview that she found out about John's death when Jennifer McCabe called her at 4:55 a.m. How is that possible if they did not find his body until 6:04 a.m.? It makes no sense. And it's clear as day in the interview that she did with him. The officer did the interview. I think it had the interview time and then the time of the report, as in like when he typed up his report, was like 2 hours later. So between those 2 hours, he wrote his report. So that's what she said. You know what I'm saying? Like, he took these, it's not like a year went by and he was like, what'd she say? I don't got my notes anymore. I don't remember. No, he wrote down what she said and he put it in that report. And she said 4:55. There's no way in hell. I mean, how did you know? How did you know he was dead? Nobody knew he was dead, supposedly, until 6:04. So how'd you know before 5 o'clock? It does appear, though, that she later changed her story in another interview and said that she found out when she came to the house around 8:30. So she completely changes her story, acts as if she never even talked to anybody that morning, and just came to the house at 8:30 with Dunkin' Donuts and happened to find out when she got there what had happened, which sounds ridiculous. Another thing, Jennifer McCabe didn't tell anyone in the original interview. So she has her original interview where they're all sitting there together. They didn't split them up. They go to the house. Everybody's there. They interview them. She talks about how Karen, so she didn't mention anything about Karen talking about hitting John. She didn't say any of that. Never mentioned it. Then the officer leaves, and a while later, she calls the officer and asks him if he can come back because some things have just come back to her mind and she wants to change her statement. And when he comes back, that's when she says, I now remember her saying several times that she must have hit him. Wasn't that damn convenient? You didn't know that an hour ago, 30 minutes ago, however long ago this officer was here, but now all of a sudden you know. I don't know. It could be coincidence. It could be she forgot. It could be she's lying. I don't know. Also, in another interview, she says when Karen called her that morning, she said that she left John at the Waterfall bar and he never come home. So what happened is that Karen says she got up the next morning and John still wasn't home, and she became hysterical because she couldn't find him and he wasn't answering his phone. And she did not believe that he would have stayed the night at the Alberts home because he had custody of his niece and nephew. He had adopted them, and he would have never left them there home alone overnight. So she fully expected him to come home. So she thought something must be wrong. So she calls Jennifer McCabe and is asking, like, what the hell? And Jennifer McCabe says that Karen tried to pass it off like she hadn't seen him since the bar the night before. So what Jennifer's insinuating is that Karen didn't know anybody saw her car pull up outside. So Karen was trying to act like she ain't even seen John since the bar. And that Jennifer was like, no, you were at the house because we saw you pull up outside. I mean, John never came in, but we did see your car pull up. And she says that Karen was like, I don't even remember going over there last night. Now, who knows? Maybe that's true. Maybe Karen doesn't remember any of it. Maybe she did back over him and she didn't remember. I don't know. But it ain't sounding great for the prosecution. Another thing was that in the indictment, they charged her with 3 different things. And one of them, it was odd to me that the indictment said she assaulted and beat him. I thought that odd specifically because of the fact that there's been so much argument back and forth over his injuries. And the whole point that the prosecution has tried to make is that he was in no altercation. He wasn't beaten, that those were simply marks from being hit by a car. So if they were simply marks by being hit by a car, why does your indictment say that she assaulted and beat him? So was he beaten or wasn't he? I mean, you can't have it both ways. Also, how is there any activity on his phone at all if they found his phone under his body? And it would have been there for hours. I mean, if they're saying that John O'Keefe never made it into the house and that she hit him before he could make it into the house, then he was laying on top of that phone from 12:30 on. So who was going these 88 steps and then ascending and descending 3 flights of stairs and then going 30 more steps? Who was doing any of that with his phone? Because his phone was under him. So how did that happen? It makes no sense. Nagel, if you don't remember some of the stuff I'm talking about, please go back and watch the video before this, which it gives you the whole information about Karen Read. This is just the recap. So you might want to listen to that. And if you don't know who some of these people are, but if Nagel saw Karen in the car alone, where was John if he wasn't inside? Because Nagel is saying that he and Karen Read and John showed up at the same time, that they pulled up like this in the road and that Karen pulled right onto the road and then they pulled in left and pulled up right behind her at this house. So he's saying that the entire time they were there, he never saw anybody get out of the car. He never saw her drive anywhere. He didn't see her back into anything. And that when he left, he drove by, he went around her and was going out straight down the road, and he could see inside that there was a woman inside who had the light on and was sitting there. And he identified her as Karen Read. So if he was there the entire time that Karen's vehicle was there and he never saw anyone get out of it, then not only did he not see Karen Reed hit John, but he didn't even see John get out of the car and go into the house. But he did see Karen alone in the car. So where the fuck was John? This is mind-boggling to me, no matter what side of the case you're on. I mean, how did John get anywhere? How did he get into this 12 feet from the roadway dead, or into the house without anyone seeing it? If Nagel's eyes were on her the entire time her car was parked at that residence, how did no one see him exit the car? It makes no sense. I will say, though, you don't retroactively create an alibi, so I'm really interested as to what the calls from Jennifer are about. The defense is making a huge to-do about the fact that Jennifer erased a bunch of calls to John's phone around 12:30, between 12:30 and 12:40. But here's the thing. You don't retroactively think, oh crap, I need to go back and create an excuse or an alibi for myself, because you can't go back and make calls. You either made them at 12:30 to 12:40 or you didn't. So if they did do something to John, why was she calling his phone over and over? To me, that more sounds like she's calling his phone because she didn't know where the hell he's at. And she's like, you're parked outside. Why the hell aren't you coming inside? So that doesn't look good for Karen Reed for me. Police saying they found glass on the bumper. How? How did it stay there that long? You're telling me in a blizzard, basically, that this glass stayed on the rear bumper through her driving home that night, driving back over to John's the next morning, driving to her parents' house, and nothing come off. That's hard to find it. Also, how did nobody see the body when they left? Everybody else in the house says they left at 1:30, so why didn't they see his body laying out there? Also, why didn't anybody come outside when everything started the next morning? Everybody gets there the next morning. There's a whole, firefighters, police officers, ambulance. There's tons of people out there. They say that Karen Reed is hysterical and screaming and crying. How did nobody in the house come outside? There's a dead body in your front yard and you don't go outside to see why everybody's out there? Seems odd. Also, why didn't if there are people like Julie Albert saying she looked out the kitchen window and saw Karen Reed's car out there that night, the McCabe's are both saying that they were standing at the door and saw Karen's car. Well, here's the thing. If they saw that, why didn't they mention that they also saw Nagel's truck or the car of Caitlin Albert's boyfriend? Because his truck was there as well. They only saw the SUV, which I guess I should take that back. Maybe they did tell them they saw other cars and we just don't know. Maybe they didn't find it important enough to put into the notes. I don't know. But I didn't see it. Anyway, I hate to wrap this up super quickly, but like I said, I have a client. That is the update right now for Karen Reed. I will keep checking into it and let you know what else we find out or what else I come across in the paperwork. Join us next time. We'll continue to explore all our thought-provoking and puzzling stories. Thank you for tuning in to True Crime. To Crime on the Record. Like, I don't even know what our name is. Well, you tell I'm trying to be quick. Remember to subscribe, rate, leave your comments, thoughts in the comments, whatever you're thinking. You don't have to agree, disagree. It doesn't matter. We take everybody's opinions. But until next time, stay curious.